Have you ever felt like history, the kind they write in books, only tells you half the story? The polished version, the one signed by kings and popes, carved in stone. But what about the whispers? The stories that slip through the cracks of the official record? Tonight, I want you to do something simple. Just listen. Maybe you're in your car, driving late at night, the road stretching out before you. Maybe you're in bed, the lights low, waiting for sleep. Before we begin, I'm curious. Where are you listening from? What time is it where you are? It's extraordinary, isn't it? That we can gather like this, across oceans and time zones, connected by nothing more than curiosity. And perhaps a feeling that the past isn't quite finished with us. Because tonight, we aren't just looking at history. We're looking under it. We're tracing a story of a brotherhood that was meant to be erased by fire, but which, according to the whispers, simply learned to live in the shadows. If you're new here to Veiled History, make sure you're subscribed. It helps us keep digging in these shadows together. Now, let the world outside fade away. Let's go back to a cold day in Paris, a day of fire, and a day of new beginnings. The year is 1314. The month is March. Imagine the air over Paris, sharp and cold, carrying the smell of wood smoke and the River Seine. On a small island in the heart of the city, a crowd is gathered. They are silent, watching. They've come to see the end of an era. Two men stand on a pyre, bound to the stake. Their names are Geoffroy de Charny and Jacques de Molay. He is the 23rd and final Grand Master of the Knights Templar. For 7 years, he has been a prisoner of King Philip the Fair. For 7 years, his order, once the most powerful in Christendom, the bankers of kings, the elite shock troops of the Crusades, has been systematically dismantled. They were accused of heresy, of spitting on the cross, of idolatry, their property seized, their brothers tortured into confessions. And now, this is the final act. The white banner of the temple, the Beauséant, has collapsed. The decree has been read. The fire is lit. This is the image history wants us to remember. The defiant old man, his white beard lit by the flames, shouting his famous curse, summoning the king and the pope to meet him before God's judgment within the year. It's a powerful story. It's a dramatic ending. But what if it wasn't an ending at all? What if it was a diversion? Think about it. The Templars were a vast, disciplined, and secretive organization. They had commanderies all over Europe. They had agents in every court. Did they truly fall so easily, so completely, in a single morning raid 7 years prior? Or did they sacrifice their public face to save their secret heart? Because there are other whispers, stories that aren't in the official papal bulls, legends that say, while all of Paris watched the Grand Master burn, while the smoke rose to obscure the towers of Notre Dame, a few chosen knights were moving, not away from Paris, but beneath it, into the catacombs, the ancient Roman quarries that form a dark, silent labyrinth under the city streets. These men weren't carrying chests of gold. The king had already looked for that. They were carrying ledgers, star charts, coded genealogies, and relics that had never seen the inside of a church, the true archive. While Jacques de Molay became a martyr in the fire, these men became ghosts in the stone. They weren't fleeing for their lives. They were moving to their next post. And as they vanished into the earth, they carried with them the seed of a new vow, a vow born not of faith and light, but of ash and shadow, a vow that would be sworn at midnight far away, on the borders of a kingdom that was still at war. They emerged from the earth miles from Paris, not as knights, but as survivors. Their white mantles, the symbol of their purity and their public power, are gone, left in the tunnels, or perhaps burned, reduced to ash, just like their leader. They are shadows now, moving only by night. They split into smaller groups, 2 or 3 men at a time, melting into the landscape. They follow the old pilgrim roads south, roads they had established, they had protected for centuries. Now, they use that knowledge to become invisible. They are phantoms in their own kingdom. Weeks pass. The air grows warmer. They move through Occitania, a land that still remembered the Albigensian Crusade, a land that knew what it was to be burned for heresy, a land that knew how to keep secrets. Finally, they reach the mountains, the Pyrenees, that great jagged wall of stone that separates France from Spain. They cross it, not as an army, but as whispers on the wind. And on the other side, they find a different world. They find Aragon. This isn't the centralized, paranoid kingdom of Philip the Fair. This is a frontier, a land of castles and mountains, a place where the Reconquista, the war to reclaim Spain from the Moors, is still a living memory. It's a gray area, a place where a man's worth is measured by his sword and his silence, not by a papal decree from Avignon. It's the perfect place to disappear. And here, in the remote borderlands, the legend says they gathered one last time. Imagine it. A moonless night. A ruined chapel on a high plateau, one of their own small commanderies, abandoned years before. The wind hissing through the broken stones. A dozen men, maybe more. The last of the Order's true leadership. The strategists, the spy masters, the keepers of the archive. They light no candles. The only light comes from a small, smoky fire in the center of the ruined floor. They stand in a circle, staring into the flames, the same flames that took Jacques de Molay. And in that fire, they see not an end, but a purification. The fire, they realize, had burned away their chains, their wealth, their lands, their political obligations, their duty to kings who betrayed them and popes who abandoned them. It had burned away everything except their vow. And so, in the midnight quiet of the Spanish mountains, they swear a new oath. An oath to the shadow. They will no longer serve a visible throne. They will no longer fight for a cross on a banner. They will serve the idea that the temple was founded on, to protect, to guide, to preserve knowledge. But they will do it from the darkness, where no one can see them, and no one can betray them again. This is the Black Oath. The legend gives them a single, chilling phrase, a motto for their new, invisible brotherhood. What burns by fire shall serve by shadow. This is the moment, the birth of the Black Templars. And this vow wasn't just poetry. It was a strategy. Their first act was not to hide, but to begin their secret war. And it would begin right here in the complex warring kingdoms of Aragon, where they would soon be noticed, not as knights, but as something new, something that had no name. So, the oath is sworn. The Black Templars have vanished into the mountains of Aragon. Now, let's fast forward a few years, the 1320s. The world has seemingly moved on. The Templar Order is officially dissolved. King Philip is dead. Pope Clement is dead. Their curse, it seems, was fulfilled. But in Aragon, the borderlands are still complicated. This is a place where Christian lords, Moorish holdouts, and Jewish communities live in a tense, fragile balance. Bandits are common. Mercenary companies roam, selling their swords to the highest bidder. It's a messy, violent, and often lawless world. And into this chaos, a new mystery emerges. Local chronicles, letters from minor barons to the king, and reports from village priests start to mention a new and deeply unsettling fighting force. They aren't a formal army. They seem to be pilgrims. But these aren't the usual pilgrims, walking barefoot to a shrine. These men travel in small, disciplined bands. They are cloaked, quiet, and armed. And when they fight with a skill that terrifies the local bandit lords. But here is the strange part, the part that confuses everyone. They don't fight for money. A typical mercenary captain would sack a village or demand a high price for its protection. These pilgrims do neither. They appear, defend a town from an attack, and then they are gone by morning. Even stranger, they have no allegiance. 1 week, they might be seen defending a small Christian village near Zaragoza. A month later, their same silent, effective tactics are used to defend a Moorish village further south from a rival Christian baron. This is madness to the medieval mind. You fight for your king, you fight for your god, or you fight for gold. These men seem to fight for something else. They carry no banners. Their shields are bare. Their tunics are the color of ash or dyed a simple dark brown. No red cross, no lion, no castle, nothing. When they are forced to present documents at a checkpoint, their papers are perfect. They are simple letters of passage for pilgrims, but they bear no lord's authority, no bishop's blessing, no seal. Frustrated scribes and captains, trying to make sense of it in their reports, give them the only name they can. They call them milites sine sigillo, the soldiers without a seal. To the outside world, they are just another band of dangerous, unpredictable mercenaries. A footnote in the chaos of the borderlands. But to the few who are watching, to the agents of the Pope, who are still hunting for any remnant of the Templar Order, this behavior is a terrifying clue. It's not random. It's a pattern. These knights without seals aren't just defending random villages. They are defending villages that have libraries, villages that are home to certain scholars. They aren't protecting territory. They aren't protecting faith. They are protecting knowledge, and they are protecting the people who hold it. This is the first faint signal of their new secret war. This is the key, the answer to the mystery. Why would these elite Christian knights, these remnants of the Holy Templar Order, risk their lives to protect Jewish Kabbalists or Moorish astronomers, men the Church often considered, at best, suspect, and at worst, heretical? The answer is simple, and it tells us everything about their new oath. They weren't protecting heretics. They were protecting their archive. When King Philip sacked the Paris Temple, he was looking for gold, land deeds, and confessions. He was a politician. He thought in terms of wealth and power. But the true treasure of the Templars was never gold. It was their knowledge. Think of them as the first great multinational corporation. They had a network that stretched from Scotland to Jerusalem. To run that network, you needed more than swords. You needed maps, not just of roads, but of coastlines, of ocean currents, of safe harbors. You needed ciphers, unbreakable codes to send messages about troop movements, banking transfers, and political secrets. You needed medicine, advanced battlefield surgery and herbal knowledge learned in the East. You needed astronomy to navigate. You needed engineering to build your fortresses. You needed philosophy, texts from Aristotle and Plato, preserved not by Rome, but by the very Islamic scholars they had fought and, in peace, had learned from. This was the Templar archive, their operating system. And when the order was about to shatter, they didn't hide this knowledge in a single, buried chest. That's a myth. You can't bury living knowledge. Instead, they distributed it. They entrusted it, in fragments, to the very people who were already their partners. The Jewish and Moorish scholars who had acted as their translators, their physicians, and their financial counterparts for decades. Men who lived in the borderlands, outside the direct, crushing grip of King Philip. They hid their archive in people. And now, the Knights without seals had one mission: to guard this living library, to ensure that the men and women who held these fragments survived the chaos of the 14th century. They became the invisible guardians of a knowledge that the world was trying to erase, while the world called them soldiers without a seal. This was not the name they called themselves. In their own secret correspondence, the faint traces of which appear in encrypted letters found centuries later, they used a different name, a Latin name that defined their new purpose. Not Milites Templi, the soldiers of the temple, but Custodes Noxis, the custodians of the night. Their work in Aragon was a success. The archive was secured. The living libraries were safe. But this was only the beginning. Guarding the past was one thing, but their black oath demanded more. It demanded they shape the future. And as the 1330s dawned, a new, massive conflict was brewing to the north, a war that would last for over a century and would provide the perfect shadow for their real work to begin. The archives are safe. The Custodes Noxis have succeeded in their first quiet mission in Aragon. But now, a new, terrible fire is being lit in the north. The year is 1337. The King of England, Edward III, has laid claim to the throne of France. A war is beginning. A war that will not end for more than a century. History calls it the 100 Years' War. It will be a brutal, sprawling conflict, fought in pitched battles, savage raids, and grinding sieges. It will define England and France forever. To the world, this is a dynastic struggle, a war of kings, a war of daylight. But for the Black Templars, this war is an opportunity. It is the perfect shadow. A vast, chaotic canvas where they can begin their real work. Their oath, sworn in that ruined chapel, was not just to preserve knowledge. It was to use it, to serve the balance. And what is a war between two great Catholic kingdoms but the ultimate imbalance? So, as the armies of England and France begin to gather, a new kind of agent appears in their camps. These men are not knights. They are not priests. They are advisors. They are merchants who arrive with impeccable letters of credit, offering to finance a baron's campaign. They are quiet, gray-robed men who offer themselves as translators and scribes to generals. They are map makers who seem to know the terrain of France better than the French lords themselves. And the strangest part? They appear on both sides. In the English camp, a Flemish merchant might advise an English earl on the most efficient way to ransom a captured French knight. And in the French camp, a Catalan scholar might quietly advise a French duke on how to move supplies, using the exact same coded ledgers and secure routes the Templars had perfected a generation earlier. These gray men, as some called them, had no visible connection, but their methods were identical. They didn't just steer money, they steered alliances. A letter might accidentally be intercepted, warning one side of a planned attack, forcing a truce. A ransom for a key prisoner, a man who wanted peace, might be paid by an anonymous donor, allowing him to return to court and argue against the war. Think about that. While England and France were fighting a public war of slaughter, the Black Templars were fighting a shadow war of influence, a war fought in ledgers, in whispered conversations in tents at dusk, in ransoms paid and alliances quietly brokered. They were not trying to help one side win. They were trying to keep both sides from destroying each other. It was a war fought in daylight, balanced by those who moved at dusk. The Black Templars had become the invisible mediators, the secret guardians of an equilibrium that the kings themselves were too blind to see. For decades, this shadow war continues. The Gray Men, the Custodes Noxis, weave their influence through the chaos, trying to dull the sharp edges of the conflict. But the 100 Years' War is not a clean war. It's not just knights and chivalry. It's a war of chevauchée, a brutal strategy of scorched earth. Armies march through the countryside, burning villages, destroying crops, and slaughtering peasants. It is total war in its most primitive form. And for the Black Templars, this is the ultimate failure of balance. This is chaos. This all comes to a head in the year 1415. The young, ambitious King Henry V of England is in France. His campaign has been a disaster. He is retreating toward the coast, his army exhausted, starving, and ravaged by dysentery. Near a small village called Agincourt, the French army finally corners him. The French are a massive, glittering host. Thousands of knights, the flower of French nobility, armored in polished steel, confident of an easy victory. They outnumber the English, perhaps 6-1. The field between them is a sea of mud, churned up by autumn rain and plows. The battle that follows is not a glorious duel. It is a massacre. The French nobility, arrogant and disorganized, charge into the mud. Their heavy armor becomes a death sentence. They are bogged down, trapped, and the English longbowmen, those peasant-born archers, rain tens of thousands of arrows down upon them. It's a slaughter. The mud of the field, as one chronicler wrote, runs red. But the true moment of imbalance, the one that must have chilled the Black Templars to the bone, happens after the main charge. The English are exhausted. Their lines are thin, and they are now guarding thousands of high-born French prisoners, worth a king's ransom. Suddenly, a cry goes up. A second French line is advancing. Henry V, in a moment of cold, pragmatic panic, gives an unthinkable order. Execute the prisoners. All of them. It is a war crime, even by the standards of the 15th century. A shocking breach of the chivalric code. English knights refuse the order, and the king has to send his own squires to do the work. Hundreds, perhaps thousands, of French nobles are killed, not in battle, but in cold blood. This is the epitome of chaos. Now, why am I telling you this? Because of what was found after. Weeks later, when the armies are gone and the local villagers and monks finally creep back to the field to bury the dead, a task that will take months, they find something that doesn't make sense. In the mud, half buried near the heaps of the slain, they find crosses. But not the silver crucifixes of a bishop or the ornate crosses of a great lord. They are small, simple, forged from crude iron, as if made in a hurry by a common soldier smith, and all of them are black, not painted, but scorched, deliberately held in a fire until they were the color of ash. These crosses are not scattered randomly. They seem to mark specific places. One is found near a cluster of English dead. Another is found driven into the mud next to a French banner. Some reports the kind that never make it into the official histories, claim they mark the ground as a ward. The outline from the script is precise. They mark ground secured for mercy. What could this mean? Imagine the scene. The battle is over. The massacre of the prisoners is underway. Could a Black Templar agent, a gray man in Henry's own camp, have moved through the chaos? Could he have used these simple, scorched crosses to mark certain men? A ward, a sign to other custodians, perhaps on the English side. The squires ordered to do the killing. A code passed in the middle of the slaughter. This one lives. This man, no matter his banner, is part of our network. He is part of the balance. He is not to be touched. It's a chilling thought. The Black Templars, unable to stop the massacre, were instead managing it. Triage in the middle of a war crime. They were trying to save their assets, trying to preserve the few men of reason on both sides who could help rebuild the peace after the battle was over. It was not about saving France or helping England. It was about saving civilization from the men who were leading it. This was their new, terrible purpose. Not to fight, but to restrain. To move through the slaughter, unseen, leaving only these quiet, blackened iron crosses. A secret code of mercy amid the madness. This secret network, this strange geometry of symbols. It wasn't just in France. The trail of these ghost knights, these men who moved in shadow, also led north. To a land of mist and stone, a kingdom that had its own very old connection to the Templar name. A place called Scotland. While the Custodes Noxis were playing their subtle, dangerous games of balance in France, another thread of the Templar legacy was weaving itself into the fabric of a different nation, a nation of mist and stone, a nation that had, itself, defied the Pope. Let's go back in time, just for a moment. Back to that same pivotal year, 1314. While Jacques de Molay was burning in Paris, just 3 months later, a desperate battle was being fought in the north. The Battle of Bannockburn. King Robert, the Bruce of Scotland, a king in rebellion, an outlaw, a man who had been excommunicated by the Pope, was facing the full, terrifying might of England's army. The English, led by Edward II, were a massive, heavily armored force, confident they would crush the Scottish rebels in a single day. The Scots were outnumbered, fighting for their very survival. Their king, Robert the Bruce, was a brilliant tactician. But on that field, he was on the brink of annihilation. And then, a story, a legend, so old and so persistent that it's become part of Scotland's soul. Have you heard it? The battle is raging. The English cavalry is charging the Scottish schiltrons. Those hardened circles of men with long spears, a bristling hedgehog defense. The English are breaking through. The Scottish line is about to collapse. And just at that moment, just when all hope seems lost, a new force appears on the ridge. They are horsemen, fresh, disciplined. They carry banners, but no one recognizes them. Some legends say they were the white Beauseant of the temple. Others, more in line with our story, say their banners were simple, or even dark. They don't wait for an order. They charge. They hit the English flank with the force of a tidal wave. Their charge is precise, devastating, and it shatters the English line. The English army breaks. The battle becomes a rout. Scotland wins its freedom. In the aftermath, no one can say who they were. They weren't part of Bruce's army. They simply appeared. This is the legend of the Ghost Knights of Bannockburn. Now, think. Who were these men? A phantom army? Or something more tangible? Go back to 1307, when the Templars were first arrested in France. Many knights fled. The Templar fleet, that massive, mysterious fleet docked at La Rochelle, simply sailed into the Atlantic and vanished from history. Where did it go? Many believe it sailed north, to the one kingdom in Europe that was outside the Pope's authority, the one place papal bulls and arrest warrants meant nothing. Scotland, the kingdom of the excommunicated Robert the Bruce. It makes a cold, perfect kind of sense. The Templars, hunted by the Pope, find refuge with a king, also hunted by the Pope. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. But what if Bannockburn wasn't a one-time miracle? What if it was just the first payment? The Templars gave Bruce their military skill, their savoir-faire, and in return, he gave them the one thing they needed more than gold, a haven, a place to disappear. They didn't just fight and leave. They stayed. They melted into the Scottish clans, into the landscape, and their descendants, the children of these ghost knights, they didn't resurface as warriors. They became something far more subtle and far more permanent. They became silent engineers, master masons, architects who would build Scotland's most mysterious fortresses and chapels, embedding their knowledge, their geometry, their secret, right into the stone itself. So, these descendants of the Templar refugees, these silent engineers, they fade into the Scottish guilds and families. Their knowledge, their secret, waits. It waits for over a century. It passes from father to son, not as a spoken oath, but as a craft. A way of seeing the world, a way of building, a sacred geometry. And then, in the mid-15th century, around 1446, it finds its ultimate expression. In a small village called Roslin, just south of Edinburgh, a man named William Sinclair, the first Earl of Caithness, decides to build a chapel. Now the Sinclairs are a family long whispered to have Templar connections. Legends tie them to that original refuge, to the knights who fought for Robert the Bruce. And the chapel they build is not a normal chapel. If you've ever seen it, Roslin Chapel, you know what I mean. From the outside, it looks small, almost like a stone jewel box, impossibly ornate. But when you step inside, the world changes. It's not a sparse, humble Scottish kirk. It's a forest of stone. The air is cold, and your voice echoes differently, as if the stone itself is listening. Every single surface, every ceiling, every pillar, every window arch is carved, not just with saints and angels, but with a bewildering, almost manic explosion of symbols. There are hundreds of faces. The green man, a pagan symbol of nature, staring out from the walls. His foliage-covered face is everywhere. And stranger still, there are plants. Carved into the arches, clear as day, are depictions of maize, corn, cacti, plants that are native only to the New World. Think about that. Roslin Chapel was completed in the 1480s. Christopher Columbus would not discover America until 1492. So, how? How did the masons of this small Scottish chapel know what maize looked like? Unless their patrons, the descendants of the Templars, already knew the maps? Unless that vanished fleet from La Rochelle had sailed further than just Scotland? The chapel feels less like a place of worship and more like a book, a codex written in stone, meant to be read only by those who knew the language. And that language is Templar geometry. The patterns in the ceiling, the famous, intricate apprentice pillar, and its companion, the master pillar. They aren't just decorative. They are encoded. The local legends, The ones whispered in the village of Roslyn for centuries are very clear. They say the chapel is just a shell, a beautiful, complex stone casing, and that the real chapel, the real secret, lies beneath the floor, in a sealed, hidden vault. The legends say this vault contains the greatest lost treasures of the Knights Templar. Not gold, but something more precious. Some say it's the lost Gospels. Some say it's the original records from the Temple of Solomon. And some say it holds the Holy Grail itself. The outline we're following calls it a relic of light. The local tales give a name to the guardians. They say the chapel is watched over by the Black Knights of St. Ninian, a secret brotherhood descended from the Sinclair's original Templar protectors who still guard the vault. This is the masterpiece of the Custodes Noxis. They understood that parchment burns. They had seen it in Paris. They understood that oaths can be broken, but stone endures. They built a fortress for their most sacred secret, and they disguised it as a house of God. They encrypted their knowledge, their maps, their heritage, into 1,000 carvings, hiding it in plain sight for a future generation to one day decipher. This desperate act of preservation, of hiding a truth in stone, wasn't just happening in the mists of Scotland. As the 15th century drew to a close, the last vestiges of the Old World were falling. And far to the south, in the heat and dust of Spain, the Black Templars had one final crusade to fight, a secret war. At the very end of an era, let's leave the cold mists of Scotland and the stone secrets of Roslyn Chapel. Our journey now takes us south, far south. The air grows hot, dry, thick with a taste of dust and almonds. The year is 1492. It's a year of profound endings and terrifying new beginnings. In the very same year that the Sinclair's chapel in Scotland is being finished, the year Columbus, using maps that perhaps the Templars themselves had charted, is sailing west into the unknown. Another much older story is reaching its final bloody chapter. We are in Spain. We are at the gates of Granada. For 700 years, the Iberian Peninsula has been a land of three faiths: Christian, Muslim, and Jewish, living together in a complex, often brilliant, sometimes brutal balance. But now, that is over. The Catholic monarchs, Ferdinand and Isabella, have come to finish the Reconquista. Imagine the scene. The great soaring, red-walled fortress of the Alhambra, the last jewel of the Moorish kingdoms, is surrounded. The siege has lasted for months. The air is thick with cannon smoke, a new, brutal technology. This isn't just a battle. It's an exorcism. It's a holy war, a clear, stark conflict between the cross and the crescent. Or, so it seems. Because in any war, especially a holy war, there are always other interests. There are those who move in the gray spaces between the banners. As the city's defenses begin to crumble, as the main Spanish army prepares for the final, chaotic assault, witnesses on both sides report something strange. A third group, a small, ruthlessly efficient unit of riders. They are not fighting with the main Spanish force. They are not part of the noble houses. They seem to be on their own, separate, terrifyingly precise mission. Their armor is not the polished, shining steel of the Spanish grandees, eager for glory. It is dark, scored, battered, soot dark, as one chronicle calls it, the color of men who have lived in the shadow of the forge, not the light of the court. They carry no banners. They shout no battle cries. And they are not plundering. As the city falls into chaos, They are seen moving against the tide of looters, moving towards a specific, non-military target deep within the city, and they are guarding something. A single, large, iron-bound chest. A chest that, according to the few reports that mention it, is marked with a single, simple Latin word. Not Victoria for victory. Not Deus vult, for God wills it. The word is hospitium, a word that means hospitality, refuge, sanctuary. They're not taking something. They are rescuing it. They move with a speed and silence that is unnatural. They cut through the street fighting, but they don't join it. They are a phantom scalpel, not a clumsy hammer. And the defenders of Granada, the Moors inside the Alhambra, they see them. They write about them. But they don't describe them as Spanish knights. The Arabic chronicles, written by men watching their world end, mention something that makes the skin crawl. They describe Christian monks who fought like jinn, like spirits. Men whose faces were unseen, hidden by shadow and steel, who move through the smoke of the burning libraries. And then, just as the city's gates were finally thrown open, they and their hospitium chest simply vanished. The Spanish army was focused on capturing a king. They were focused on conquering a kingdom. They had no idea that this small shadow unit, these jinn, were there to capture the memory of that kingdom. Their mission wasn't conquest. It was a heist. This was the Black Templars' last secret crusade. So why? Why Granada? Why this last, desperate act in a war that wasn't theirs? While Ferdinand and Isabella, the Catholic monarchs, saw Granada as a symbol, a rebellious kingdom to be conquered, the Custodes Noxis saw it as a library, and not just any library. For centuries, while much of Christian Europe was struggling through the Dark Ages, Moorish Spain, Al-Andalus was a beacon of light. The libraries of Granada and the great palace of the Alhambra didn't just hold the Quran. They held the lost works of Aristotle and Plato, saved from oblivion. They held advanced texts on medicine, mathematics, algebra, the very concept of zero. They held star charts so precise they wouldn't be equaled in Europe for another 100 years. This was the accumulated knowledge of a golden age. But it was even more than that. Do you remember Aragon? Do you remember the Living Archive? The knowledge the Templars had entrusted to Jewish and Moorish scholars centuries before? This is where much of it had ended up. This was their own archive. Their maps, their ciphers, their engineering texts, their philosophy. All of it kept safe for them, inside the walls of their enemy. And now a new fanatic balance was coming. Ferdinand and Isabella were not just conquerors. They were cleansers. Their victory would be followed by the Inquisition, by the great burning of books, by an order that all non-Christian knowledge was heresy, to be purged by fire. The Black Templars saw this coming. They knew this wasn't a war. It was an erasure. Their last crusade wasn't for God. It wasn't for a king. It was for memory. So, as the Spanish army stormed the gates, focused on the throne and the treasury, the jinn, those dark-armored riders, moved toward the libraries. They ignored the gold tapestries. They ignored the silver plate. They were a surgical rescue team. They knew exactly what they were looking for. The hospitium chest wasn't filled with plunder. It was filled with manuscripts, the most dangerous, the most precious, the most irreplaceable fragments of human and Templar knowledge. And then, just as the city fell, just as the victory banners of Castile and Aragon were being unfurled over the red towers, they vanished. the smoke from the fires of the sack, the chaos of the looting, the sheer joy and confusion of the victorious army. It was the perfect cover. When the Spanish inquisitors and royal scribes finally entered the libraries days later, they found gaps. They found shelves burned by looters, yes, but they also found strange, empty spaces, a selective, intelligent culling. All the truly important texts, the ones that held the keys to the old world, were gone. The riders, the soot-dark djinn, and their hospitium chest were gone. They had melted back into the mountains, their cargo of memory intact. This was the last time the Black Templars would be seen, in armor, on a battlefield. Their war for the past was over. But a new, even more terrible war was about to begin. A war within their own faith. Europe was about to tear itself apart in a firestorm called the Reformation. And in this new war, the Black Templars would have to evolve again. They would trade their swords, not for ledgers, but for the silence of the mediator. They would become the unseen guardians of balance in a world that had gone completely mad. The 15th century closes. The Black Templars have secured the past, the knowledge of Granada, the secrets in the stones of Rosslyn. But the 16th century, the 1500s, brings a new kind of war. It's not a war for land, like in France. It's not a war for a city, like in Granada. It's a war for the soul of God. History calls it the Reformation. Think of Europe as a single great stone cathedral. For 1,000 years, everyone has worshipped inside it, under one roof. And now, suddenly, a single crack appears. Martin Luther, John Calvin, the 95 Theses, the crack splinters. It races up the walls, across the vaulted ceilings, and the entire vast structure of Christendom begins to shudder. Brother turns against brother, prince against prince, Catholic against Lutheran, Lutheran against Calvinist. This isn't a war of balance. This is a war of absolutes. It's a war of you are with us or you are a heretic. It's a war of auto-da-fe, of iconoclasts smashing statues, of new inquisitions. The fires that burned Jacques de Molay are lit once again, all across the continent. But this time, for everyone. For the Black Templars, the Custodes Noxis. This is the ultimate nightmare. Their guiding principle, balance, is being torn to pieces. How can you mediate a war when the very idea of a middle ground is seen as a sin? They can't fight this. They can't use swords. Their old methods are useless. So, they evolve again. They become the custodians of balance. They realize that if the structure is collapsing, you can't save the building. You can only save the people, the ones who know how to rebuild after it falls. And so, a new, strange story begins to emerge in the 1500s. A story of protection. A Lutheran reformer, a man preaching a new, radical idea, is on his way to a debate. His route is known. An ambush is planned by a local Catholic duke. The night before, a cloaked stranger appears at his inn. He says nothing. He simply hands the reformer a new map and a fresh horse. The reformer takes the new route and lives. A papal envoy, a cardinal, a man of peace, trying to negotiate a truce in a German state, is set to be assassinated by Protestant fanatics. Days before he arrives, his would-be assassins are found, not dead, but disarmed, bound, and left in the town square with a simple note. A note signed with no name, just 2 letters, etched onto a piece of parchment. C.T. Custodes Templi, the guardians of the temple. This is their new war. They aren't saving a faith. They are saving the conversation. They protect the Lutheran envoy on his way to speak to a Catholic prince. They protect the papal mediator on his way to speak to a Protestant city. They are the unmarked guards, the invisible bodyguards, for both sides. Their goal is no longer to win, but to ensure that the lines of communication, the fragile threads of diplomacy, are not cut. They are trying to keep Europe from descending into a darkness from which it might never return. And to do this, they have to create a new kind of space, a place so secret, so neutral, that even the most bitter of enemies could meet. A place that Venetian diplomats would soon write about with a mixture of fear and awe. To keep the conversation alive, you need a safe place to talk. But in the 16th century, there were no safe places. If a Protestant prince met with a Catholic bishop, it was seen as treason by one side and heresy by the other. The ground itself was hostile. So, the Black Templars, the Custodes Templi, had to create one. They didn't build a fortress. They didn't found a new city. They used the spaces in between, the forgotten places. A salt cellar beneath a guild hall in a neutral city like Geneva, a ruined Roman vault on the border of France and the German states, a high-walled, abandoned vineyard. These places had three things in common. They were neutral, they were easily secured, and they were dark. Let's look at the records, not the official histories, but the private letters, the coded dispatches. The most pragmatic and perhaps the most cynical observers of the age were the Venetian diplomats. They were the eyes and ears of Europe. They believed in gold and ships, not in ghosts or gods. And in the mid-1500s, they start writing about something that unnerves them. One ambassador, in a secret report to the Doge, describes a peace negotiation between a German prince and a papal nuncio, a meeting that should have been impossible. He writes that the meeting was not held in a palace, not in a church. It was held in a candleless room. Think about that. Imagine the scene. You are a powerful duke. Your mortal enemy, a cardinal, is led into the same room. The door is closed, and you are plunged into total darkness. You can't see his face. You can't see if he's reaching for a weapon. You can't see his guards. You are completely vulnerable. Why would any of them agree to this? The Venetian diplomat provides the answer. He says the meeting was not attended just by the two parties. It was attended by others. He calls them the black guests. He writes that these guests do not speak. They do not take a side. They are just there, a silent presence in the dark. And their presence is the only guarantee of safety. They are the truce. The ambassador writes, with a tone of pure confusion, that the peace talks, the ones that fail everywhere else in the light, succeed only when the black guests attend. These were the Black Templars. They had evolved. They were no longer knights, no longer spy masters. They had become the ultimate mediators. Their presence, their reputation for absolute neutrality and lethal enforcement, was the only thing more powerful than the religious hatred tearing Europe apart. They had become the living seal, the sigil that they had abandoned centuries before. But this fragile, negotiated peace in the West, this desperate attempt to hold the center, was not the only fire. While the Custodes were trying to mend the crack in the Roman Church, far to the east, the original Christian empire, the very city that had been the beacon of the Crusades, was about to be extinguished forever. And at that final, apocalyptic moment, a few old echoes of the order, would be seen one last time in armor, making a final stand, while the Custodes Templi were weaving their new web of influence in the West, trying to save the idea of Christendom from itself. Far to the east, the original heart of Christendom was dying. The year is 1453. The month is May. We are at the walls of Constantinople, the legendary triple-walled city, the capital of the Byzantine Empire, the Second Rome. For 1,000 years, it has stood as the unbreachable fortress between Europe and the East. But now, its time is over. Outside the walls is Sultan Mehmed II, a brilliant, ruthless young conqueror. And with him, he has brought a new terrifying god of war, the super cannon, massive bronze tubes that hurl stone balls the size of men, day after day, week after week, pounding the ancient proud walls into rubble. Inside, the city is a ghost. The last emperor, Constantine V, has only a handful of defenders, a few thousand Greeks, a brave contingent of Genoese and Venetian mercenaries, and a population starved, terrified, and praying for a miracle that will not come. The air is thick with the smell of sulfur, dust, and the sea. The bells of the Hagia Sophia toll, not for prayer, but for the final alarm. The city is about to fall. It is the apocalypse, the end of an entire world, and in the middle of this final, desperate chaos, we find one last strange report. The main battle is raging at the St. Romanus Gate, where the emperor himself will die, fighting on foot among his last soldiers. But the city's fate is sealed at a different gate. A small, forgotten postern on the northern wall called the Kirkoporta. It was an old, weak gate, perhaps left unbolted by accident or by treachery. The Sultan's elite janissaries find it, and they pour through, getting behind the main defenders. This is the killing blow. But the Byzantine chroniclers, the men who survived to write about that last terrible night, they record something else. They say that at that very gate, the Kirkoporta, a final suicidal stand was made. It wasn't the Greek city guard. It wasn't the Genoese. It was a small group of Latin knights, Westerners, and their armor, their surcoats, were not the colors of Venice or Genoa or the Pope. The chroniclers, writing by candlelight in the ruins of their world, describe them with one simple detail. They were in black surcoats, no banner, no crest, no king. Who were these men? Why were they here, at the end of all things? Constantinople was the capital of the Orthodox faith, the great rival to the Pope in Rome. A true Templar, a Catholic knight, should have had no love for this city, unless they weren't there for the emperor, or for the city, or for the faith, unless they were like their brothers in Granada just 1 year before, unless they were there for a library, the Imperial Library of Constantinople, the last greatest repository of ancient knowledge in the world, holding texts from Rome and Greece that had been lost to the West for 1,000 years. Perhaps these Latin knights in black were not there to win a war they knew was lost. They were there to buy time, a desperate suicidal rearguard action, a sacrifice, to allow other brothers, Custodes, to escape from a hidden harbor with a chest of manuscripts. They died to a man at that forgotten gate. They vanished into the slaughter, their names unrecorded. A footnote in the fall of an empire. But they left something behind. Something the new conquerors, the Ottomans, would find. The city has fallen. The last emperor is dead. The smoke clears, and Constantinople is reborn as Istanbul, the capital of the Ottoman Empire. Sultan Mehmed II, the conqueror, is not just a warrior. He is a scholar, a man obsessed with history, with knowledge. He sees himself as the new Roman emperor, and he is meticulous. His scribes and archivists begin the enormous task of cataloging his new city, its treasures, its libraries, its people, and, of course, its dead. Weeks later, the bodies are cleared from the rubble of the Kirkoporta Gate. The last stand of the Latin Knights in Black is now just a grim task for a burial detail. As they strip the armor from these unknown, fanatical defenders, they find something. Beneath the scorched black surcoats, on a simple leather thong around each man's neck, is a medallion. It's not the ornate, jeweled cross of a bishop. It's not the simple crucifix of a common soldier. It's something different. It's an engraven medallion. The design is simple, geometric. It is a cross, but it is contained inside a perfect circle. The Ottoman scribes, meticulous as they are confused. They have seen the cross of the Pope. They have seen the cross of the Greeks. This is neither. It's an unknown sigil, an anomaly. To them, it's just a footnote. The strange insignia of a nameless suicidal brotherhood. They label it, perhaps, as Medallion of the Black Franks, and file it away in the vast, growing imperial treasury, a spoil of war. They have no way of knowing what they have found. They believe they have just conquered the last vestige of the old Roman Empire. They have no idea that they are holding the first sigil of the new, invisible empire. This was the Black Templar standard, the white mantle, the public red cross. That was for the world of light, the world of politics and kings. That world had burned with Jacques de Molay. This was the sigil of the Custodes Noxis, the symbol of the Black Oath. The symbolism was profound. The old cross stood alone, a symbol of faith above the world. But this new cross was inside the circle, representing the world, the cycle, the balance. The cross was now contained by it. It was serving it. It was a visual representation of their new secret creed, balance before faith. Their sacrifice at the Kirkoporta was not in vain. The manuscripts they saved, those last remnants of Greek and Roman thought, would be funneled west by other custodians, disguised as merchants. They would land in Venice and Florence, and they would help ignite the very fire of the Renaissance. And the sigil? That strange cross in the circle that the Ottomans had catalogued? It too would travel. As a curiosity, an exotic Turkish or Byzantine symbol, traded by merchants, copied by artisans. And centuries later, when new, enlightened secret societies rose in the West, groups like the Freemasons, men searching for lost ancient wisdom, for secrets from the mystical East. What symbol do you think they rediscovered? This one. They would adopt it, this Eastern mystery, this lost symbol of Constantinople, never knowing they were, in fact, adopting the hidden crest of the very Black Templars who had died there. The Custodes had, even in death, planted a seed, a symbol that would survive, its true meaning hidden in plain sight. But this wasn't their only echo. Their influence wasn't just in philosophy and symbols. Their old expertise, the skills that had made them the masters of the sea, was about to be seen again. Not in a small, desperate action, but in a vast, oceanic conflict that would decide the fate of a new, global empire. More than a century passes. The seeds planted in the ashes of Constantinople and the libraries of Granada have bloomed. The Renaissance has remade the world. The Reformation has torn it apart. And now it is 1588. A new, global empire has risen. Spain. King Philip II of Spain, the most powerful man on earth, has had enough of the heretic Queen Elizabeth of England. He's had enough of her Protestant privateers, like Francis Drake, plundering his treasure ships from the New World. He amasses a fleet so vast, so powerful, so invincible, that all of Europe holds its breath. This is the Spanish Armada. 130 ships, massive galleons, bristling with thousands of cannons, carrying 30,000 men. It is the greatest naval force in history. Its mission is simple: sail to the Netherlands, pick up a waiting army, cross the Channel, and conquer England. It is a holy war. The Pope himself has blessed it. This is the hammer of the Catholic faith, coming to crush the Protestant rebellion. The Armada sails from Lisbon, a port city with a very interesting history, a city that was once the headquarters of the Order of Christ, the rebranded name for the Portuguese Templars. As this massive crescent-shaped fleet moves like a floating city up the English Channel, it is watched, not just by English scouts on high cliffs, but by others. Naval logs, the dry, practical day-to-day records from the ships themselves, and the port manifests from Lisbon. They mention something strange. They mention an escort, a small convoy of ships, perhaps a dozen, that sail with the Armada, but are not part of it. The Spanish captains are confused by them. These ships are not on any official register. They are not Spanish. They are not Italian. They are not anything. They are long, fast, and low to the water, more like the ships of the English privateers than the heavy, lumbering galleons of the Spanish. And their sails are not the bright white canvas of a Royal Navy. They are described in one log as soot dark or dyed black. This is the night fleet. They keep their distance. They fly no flag. When signaled, they do not respond. They are just there, silent phantoms on the edge of the great fleet. The Spanish admirals, pious and practical, assume they are perhaps a rogue element, maybe Portuguese allies from the Order of Christ, sent by a minor noble, eager to join the Holy War without official sanction. They are a curiosity, but not a threat. But are they an escort? Or are they a shadow? Remember, the Templars were not just knights of the land. They were the masters of the sea. Their great fleet vanished from La Rochelle in 1307 and was never seen again. Their descendants, the Order of Christ in Portugal, used that hidden knowledge, those secret maps, to create the Age of Discovery. These sailors in the night fleet, they move with a knowledge of the wind and the currents that seems almost supernatural. They are not there to help Spain win. They are Custodes Noxis, custodians of the night, and they know that this great lumbering armada is carrying something far more valuable than cannons or soldiers, a secret that the Black Templars had guarded for centuries, a relic of their oldest knowledge that must not, cannot be allowed to fall into the hands of a single, all-powerful king, or to the bottom of the sea. So, this phantom night fleet shadows the Armada. They are not an escort. They are a scalpel, waiting for the right moment to strike. But what are they waiting for? What could be on that fleet so important that the Custodes Noxis would mobilize a dozen of their own hidden ships, risking exposure in the greatest naval conflict of the age? It wasn't gold. Spain had mountains of gold. This was a military convoy. It wasn't a person. It was a piece of knowledge, a relic saved from the ashes of the original temple in Jerusalem, passed down through the centuries and guarded. Legend gives it a name, the Compass of Solomon. Now, when you hear compass, you think of a simple magnetic needle pointing north. No, this was something else entirely. Imagine a device, perhaps a complex series of interlocking brass rings, like an astrolabe, but far more advanced. Or perhaps not a device at all, but a codex, a set of maps and ciphers. Its purpose was not to find north. Its purpose was to predict the wind. Think of the Templars. They were the masters of the sea. Their knowledge of currents and weather patterns was centuries ahead of its time. This was its source, a tool or a set of calculations that could read the ocean, feel the pressure in the air, and predict storms, days in advance. Now, imagine that power, that total predictive control of the sea, in the hands of one man, in the hands of King Philip II, a religious fanatic who believed he was God's right hand, destined to crush all opposition. If he could control the storms, he would be unbeatable. He would crush England. He would crush the Protestants. He would create an empire of absolute, unbalanced power. This is what the Black Templars were there to prevent. And they knew, because of the compass itself, that the Armada was sailing into a trap. Not a trap set by the English, but by the weather. History tells us what happened next. The Armada is harried up the channel by Francis Drake's lighter, faster ships. The Spanish are forced to anchor, and the English send in hellburners, fire ships packed with explosives that panic the fleet and break its crescent formation. But the real killer, the thing that truly destroyed the invincible Armada, was the weather. A colossal storm. A Protestant wind, the English called it, believing God himself had sent it to save them. A wind of hurricane force blowing from the southwest, relentless for days. It scattered the Spanish fleet. It smashed their heavy galleons against the rocky coasts of Scotland and Ireland. It was the greatest naval disaster in history. And in the middle of this chaos, this apocalypse of wind and water, the night fleet moved. While the English were celebrating their divine victory, and the Spanish were either drowning or being massacred on the Irish beaches, the fast, dark ships of the Custodes were not fighting. They were hunting. Survivors, half drowned, mad with grief and cold, who washed ashore, told stories. They told of the storm, yes, but they also told of other ships. Ships with black sails that seemed at home in the hurricane. Ships that moved with impossible speed and precision against the wind. They told of seeing one of these ghost ships pull alongside the wreck of the San Martin, the Spanish flagship, as it was breaking apart. They told of seeing cloaked men, moving like spiders, board the sinking galleon. Ignore the treasury, ignore the officers, and fight their way to one specific cabin. They emerged moments later with a single, lead-lined chest. Then, as quickly as they had come, they were gone, swallowed by the rain and the fog. The Black Templars had their prize. The Compass of Solomon was secure. They let the storm and the English do the rest. They didn't save the Armada. They didn't help the English. They simply removed the variable. They preserved the balance. And as their night fleet sailed away, back to the hidden ports of Portugal, or the secret coves of the Scottish Isles, the night sailors of the Temple swore a new vow. This knowledge, this compass, it was too dangerous. The world was not ready for it. Man was not ready for it. It would not be used. It would be buried. It would be taken to the safest place they knew, the last great Templar stronghold, the Convent of Christ in Tamar, Portugal. There, it would be sealed in a crypt, hidden behind crosses, and it would wait. It would wait in the dark for more than 200 years, until another man of absolute world-changing ambition, a new emperor, would come looking for it, a man whose soldiers would be stopped cold by the sigil of a blackened Templar cross. 200 years pass, 2 long centuries. The compass of storms, the relic of the Armada, lies buried in its lead-lined chest. It waits. The world has changed again. The age of kings, the age of queens like Elizabeth, and kings like Philip is dying. A new, more violent, more absolute age has begun. The age of revolution. And at the head of this new storm of fire and blood rides one man. A man who makes all the monarchs before him seem small. A man who embodies the total, world-changing ambition of an entire continent. A man who believes, more than any other, in destiny. Napoleon Bonaparte. The year is 1809. We are in Portugal. The Peninsular War is raging. Napoleon's Grande Armée, the most feared military machine on earth, has poured across the mountains, a gray tide of men in steel. And Napoleon's soldiers, they are not like the Spanish fanatics of 1588. They are children of the Enlightenment. They are enlightened, and they are plunderers. They are systematic. They carry lists. Napoleon has created a new kind of warfare, organized, academic looting. His officers are often scholars, geologists, historians. They are not just conquering nations. They are hoovering up their history. They are looking for art, for science, for relics. Anything that can be taken back to Paris, to the Louvre, to be categorized. And in Portugal, there is one supreme prize on their lists. The ancient, sprawling, mystical headquarters of the Order of Christ, the Convent of Christ, in Tamar. This is the nest, the last unbreached Templar stronghold on earth, the very place the Custodes Noxis had used as their bank, their refuge, their final fortress, the very place the night sailors had supposedly returned to 2 centuries before. The French troops under General Junot arrive. They are not gentle. They storm the gates. They push the few remaining monks aside. They stable their horses in the magnificent round church, the Charola, which was built to mimic the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. They are efficient. They spread out, tapping on walls, breaking open chests, stripping gold leaf from the altars. They move down, deeper, into the older parts of the convent, into the cellars, into the crypts, down, where the air is cold, and the stone is pure Templar. They find the vaults of the Order of Christ. They find wine, yes, they find old silver. And then, they find a wall. It is in the oldest part of the foundation. It does not match the other architecture. It is sealed tight, and it is marked, not with the seal of a Portuguese king, not with the crest of the Pope. It is marked with a single, deeply carved, equal-armed cross, and the cross is scorched. It has been deliberately blackened by fire. It is the same mark, the same sigil, the ward from the fields of Agincourt, the brand of the Black Oath. And the French soldiers, these hard, veteran soldiers who had conquered half of Europe, who had laughed in the face of priests and princes, they stop, they halt, they do not try to break the seal. Why? These are men who fear nothing. They don't fear a curse. They don't fear a dead order of monks. They stop because their officers, the enlightened scholars leading them, recognize the mark. They have seen it before, not in a church, but in their own military briefings, in the most secret, occult-focused archives back in Paris. This mark meant the vault was not to be opened by common soldiers. It was not for looters. It was designated for eyes of the Shadow Office only. The soldiers are ordered back. They seal the crypt. This is not for them. This is for a different kind of specialist. The men who follow the army. The men who are looking for the real weapons. The weapons of knowledge. The Black Vault has been found. And now, Napoleon's inner circle was about to see what the Custodes Noxis had been guarding. So, the common soldiers are cleared out. The Black Vault, with its scorched cross, is left in the cold, damp silence of the Tomar crypt. And then, they arrive. They don't wear the blue coats of the infantry, or the shining cuirasses of the cavalry. They wear the plain, black, civilian coats of the Institut de France. These are the savants. Napoleon's shadow office. These are the men who had accompanied him to Egypt, the ones who had braved the deserts to measure the pyramids and catalog the tombs. They are archaeologists, mathematicians, linguists, and occultists. They are men of the Enlightenment, yes, but they believe that enlightenment means pursuing all knowledge, even the forbidden. They are rational men, but they are rational men who have read the old texts. They know what the symbol of the scorched cross means. It is a warning. It is a key. They don't use a battering ram. They examine the seal, the stones. They consult their notes, their own secret archives, stolen from the Vatican, from other older libraries. A mason is brought in. They work with quiet academic precision. There is a click of tumblers, the groan of hidden counterweights. The wall does not fall. It opens. A rush of cold, dry air smelling of lead and ancient parchment meets them. By candlelight, they step inside. The vault is small, not a treasury, a library, a single stone room. And in the center, not gold, not a skeleton, but two things. First, a large, flat chest of dark wood, sitting on a stone pedestal. Second, stacked neatly against the wall, a series of thin, square, copper plates. The savants go to the plates first. They are heavy, covered in a green patina of age. But they are not corroded. They have been meticulously preserved, and they are etched. They are covered, not in words, but in diagrams, geometric charts, constellations, the phases of the moon. They are star maps, but different. The savants, the astronomers in the group, recognize them immediately. They are celestial charts of terrifying, impossible precision. And woven through these charts are numbers, dates. One of the scholars, his voice a dry rustle in the silence, traces a line with his finger. This line, it maps the comet of 1301. Another leans in. And this one, this is the solar eclipse of 1337. Look, here, a conjunction of planets. And then they see the annotations. Next to the date of the eclipse, a single etched word, Agincourt. No, not Agincourt. The date is wrong. It's the Battle of Crécy, a battle decided by the longbow, and, as the chroniclers wrote, by the sun being blotted out at a crucial moment. Another chart, another date, another battle. They are not just star charts. They are, as the outline states, geometric charts linking star positions to battle dates. This is what the Templars were doing. This is what the Grey Men in the 100 Years' War were using. They weren't just mediators. They were schedulers. They believed that human conflict, the very tides of war, were influenced, perhaps even governed, by the movement of the stars. This vault, this was their almanac of destiny. Then they turn to the chest. It is bound in lead. The seal is stamped, not with a cross, but with the sigil of the Order of Christ. They pry it open. Inside, resting on faded black velvet, is the compass of Solomon. It's not a simple compass. It's a sphere of interlocking brass rings covered in Hebrew and Arabic script. An astrolabe so complex it looks more like an engine. And the savants, they understand. The copper plates are the map, the software, the calendar of destiny. The compass is the machine, the hardware, the tool to read the map. This is what the Night Fleet rescued from the Armada. This is what the Custodes Noxis had hidden. Not just a weather predictor, but a war predictor. A tool to see the currents of fate and to know when and where to strike. The report is sent back to Paris, to the Emperor and Napoleon, a man obsessed with his own star, a man who spoke constantly of his destiny. He does not see this as a relic. He does not see it as superstition. He sees it as the single most powerful strategic weapon ever discovered. He issues a direct, personal order. The vault is to be sealed. The plates and the compass are to be brought to his private shadow office in Paris and classified. They are for his eyes only. The Black Vault of Tomar becomes a rumor, a piece of French military folklore. But the knowledge, the terrible, dangerous knowledge, is now in the hands of the most powerful man in Europe. The Black Templars' greatest secret, their code of balance, is about to be weaponized by a man who believed in total conquest. This knowledge, this dangerous fusion of occult geometry and military power, it wouldn't die with Napoleon. It would go underground again. It would wait for another, even darker regime to come looking for it. A regime that would take the Templar cross and twist it into a symbol of absolute terrifying evil. Napoleon's empire, like all empires, falls. He dies in exile, and the compass of Solomon, the copper plates, the entire contents of the Black Vault, they vanish once more. They are absorbed into the shadow office, yes. But as Napoleon's regime collapses, the archive is broken apart, scattered, or re-hidden by its keepers. The knowledge, the terrible, powerful knowledge of the Custodes Noxis, goes dormant. It sleeps. It waits. It waits for another century. It waits for the world to invent new, more terrible ways to kill. It waits for a new kind of ambition. A new emperor who will not be satisfied with just conquering the world, but who wishes to remake it according to a dark, twisted new faith. The 1930s. A new black shadow is falling over Europe. Not the black cloak of the Custodes, but the black uniform of the SS. And at the heart of this new dark order is a man, Heinrich Himmler. Himmler is not just a politician. He is an occultist, a true believer. He is obsessed, not with strategy like Napoleon, but with ancestry, with relics, with symbols. He creates an entire division of the SS, the Ahnenerbe, the Ancestral Heritage Office. Its mission is not military. Its mission is to hunt for the proof of a lost master race, to find the relics that will give this new regime a mystical, ancient power. And what do you think is at the very top of their list? The Holy Grail, yes. The Ark of the Covenant, of course. But most of all, they are hunting for the lost knowledge of the Knights Templar. Himmler is obsessed with them. He sees the Templars not as Catholic knights, but as a Germanic, Gothic order that possessed a secret, pure, non-Jewish form of power. He believes the SS are the true inheritors of the Templar legacy. And so, the Ahnenerbe begins its academic plunder. They are exactly like Napoleon's savants, but infinitely more sinister. They raid Masonic lodges. They steal ancient texts from monasteries. They meticulously study the geometry of old cathedrals, and they copy the Templar sigils, the cross, the circle, the double runes. They twist them, pervert them, and they stitch them onto their own black uniforms. They are, in essence, trying to become a dark mirror, a twisted, evil echo of the Black Templars. But they are not the only ones looking. As the world slides toward war, the Allies, the British, the Americans, they know what Himmler is doing. They know this isn't just a political war. It's an occult arms race. And so they form their own secret group. It's not in any official order of battle. It's a quiet gathering of academics, historians, linguists, and special forces. Men who know exactly what Himmler is looking for, because their secret societies, their lodges, have been guarding those same legends for centuries. They call themselves, simply, the Custodians. This is the secret war, inside World War II, while armies of millions fight on the beaches and in the snows of Russia. A handful of men on both sides are fighting for something else entirely, for the copper plates of Tomar, for the compass of Solomon, for the maps of Rosslyn, for the true legacy. It is a war of two crosses, the twisted cross of the Reich and the hidden cross of the Allied custodians. And what's the most chilling part? Both sides, in their most secret doctrines, claim descent from the very same vanished medieval order. The war is not just for the relics of the Templars, it's for their soul. So, the stage is set. The Second World War is a war of steel and fire, but underneath, it's a war of symbols, a race for relics. The Nazi Ahnenerbe are the hunters. They move with the frontline armies, raiding castles in France, monasteries in Poland, archives in Greece. They are looking for anything connected to the Templars, anything that holds that pure Gothic power Himmler believes in. But the Allies, their custodians, they operate differently. They are not plunderers. They are rescuers. These custodians are not a formal regiment. You will not find their names on any official roster. They are the monuments men, but with a much darker, more secret directive. They are historians from Oxford, archaeologists from Yale, even linguists from the Vatican, quietly attached to intelligence services like the OSS and SOE. And they have one overriding mission: get to the relics first. Not just to save them from destruction, but to save them from weaponization. They know what the Nazis are looking for. They know about the copper plates of Tomar. They know about the compass of Solomon. They know about the Templar star charts that Napoleon had found. They know this because their secret lodges, their private family archives, had been the ones guarding the other fragments of this knowledge. They are the real descendants of the Custodes Noxis. And so the hunt begins. Imagine it. 1944. The D-Day landings are a success. The Allies are pushing into France, while the main army is fighting for bridges and towns. A small jeep with two men who look like academics, perhaps in ill-fitting uniforms, breaks off. They have their own orders, signed by a general who doesn't even know what they're really doing. They drive all night. They are not heading for the front line. They are heading for a small, obscure chateau, a place the Ahnenerbe has been using as a regional headquarters. They don't go in with guns blazing. They slip in through a cellar window just as the local SS command is frantically burning documents, preparing to flee the Allied advance. These custodians, they ignore the burning files. They ignore the standard army intelligence. They go to a specific pre-war wine cask in the cellar. They tap the wall behind it. They remove the stones. And there, right where their 18th century Masonic map said it would be, is a small, lead-lined box. Inside is a single, blackened iron cross from Agincourt, a fragment of a copper plate from Tamar, a lost manuscript. They secure it, and they vanish back into the chaos of the war, just as the main army arrives. And how do they know each other? In the field? In a crowded, chaotic command tent? They don't wear a uniform patch. But survivors, men who were part of these units, would later talk in hushed tones about a simple identifier, a ring, worn on the gloved hand, a simple, heavy, jet-black signet ring, no frills, no gold, sometimes made of simple iron or onyx. Carved on its face, so worn it was almost invisible, was the sigil, the cross, inside the circle, the ring of the Custodes. They were the true inheritors of the Black Oath. They were not fighting for England or for America. They were fighting for balance. They were fighting to take this dangerous, mystical, Templar knowledge out of the hands of men like Himmler and Hitler. They were not trying to use it. They were trying to put it back to sleep. And when the war finally ended, when the Third Reich had collapsed into ashes, these custodians had a new problem. They had won. They had retrieved the relics. They had the copper plates, the compass, the archives. But now, the world was split. A new Cold War was beginning. A war of ideologies. A war of spies, secrets, and ciphers. And this ancient Templar knowledge, this Knight protocol, it was about to become the most sophisticated secret weapon in a new, invisible conflict. The war is over. The ashes of the Third Reich are cold. The custodians, those Allied operatives wearing the black rings, have succeeded. They have won their secret war. They have the relics, the copper plates from Tomar, the compass of Solomon, the maps, the knowledge that Himmler so desperately craved. But they have a new and perhaps even more dangerous problem. What do you do with it? The world they fought to save is already gone. It has been replaced by a new, fractured reality. The Iron Curtain has slammed down across Europe, cutting the world in two. This is a new kind of war, a Cold War. It will not be fought with armies of millions, clashing on open fields. It will be fought in the shadows, just as the Custodes Noxis had always done. It is a war of spies, a war of secrets, a war of information. And in this new war, the single most valuable weapon is the unbreakable cipher. The men who had been the custodians during the war, they don't just retire. They don't go back to being quiet university professors. They are recruited. They create the new intelligence agencies, the CIA in America. They are the quiet, unassuming men in the back rooms of MI6 in London. And they bring their knowledge with them. In the late 1940s and early 1950s, as the West scrambles to form a new alliance, NATO, they face a terrifying problem: communication. How do you send a message from a general in Washington to a spy in East Berlin with the absolute 100% certainty that the KGB is not listening in or even changing the message? This is the dawn of the computer age. Alan Turing has broken the enigma. Everyone is focused on mathematical ciphers. But the old custodians, they look to a different source. They look at the copper plates from Tomar. They realize what Napoleon's savants had only guessed at: the star charts, the geometric patterns. This wasn't just a calendar, it was a system, a non-mathematical, non-linguistic cipher, a symbolic code. a system where a specific celestial alignment, or a simple geometric shape, could verify an entire message. A key that was not a number, but a concept. And so, a new protocol is born, an ultra-secure verification system used for the most sensitive go-no-go orders. Imagine an agent, deep in hostile territory. He receives a message. At the bottom, there's no signature, just a symbol printed by the teletype, a circle, a cross, 2 dots. He checks his own hidden codebook, a codebook based not on numbers, but on the Templar charts. And he knows this message is authentic. This protocol, this cipher of the cross, needs a name. And in the recently declassified memos from the early days of NATO, in the planning documents for this new secure communication network, you can find its official classified code name. It's an inside joke for the men with the black rings, a nod to their hidden masters. They called it the Black Templar Protocol. They had taken the most ancient secret of the Custodes Noxis, and they had turned it into the most advanced secret weapon of the Cold War. But this system wasn't just for verifying messages. It was for acting on them. It was the communication network for a new generation of Shadow Knights who would trade their swords for something entirely different. But the Black Templar Protocol, it wasn't just a cipher. A cipher is a dead thing, just a key. It's useless unless it's used by a network. And this is the final evolution of the Custodes Noxis. The Cold War was a brutal game of absolutes, East versus West, communism versus capitalism. If a brilliant scientist in Prague, or a dissident writer in Moscow, or a key political thinker in East Berlin was deemed lost behind the Iron Curtain, they were simply written off. A loss, a casualty of the new, static, frozen war. But for the men with the black rings, the men who had inherited the Tamar archives, this was an imbalance. It was the same as the massacre at Agincourt. It was the same as the burning of the libraries at Granada. It was chaos. It was the waste, the destruction of precious, irreplaceable human knowledge. And so, they created a new network. A network that used the Black Templar Protocol. This network, it wasn't for assassination. It wasn't for sabotage. It had one mission: extraction. They called it the Balance Network. It was a small, elite, utterly secret unit, composed of men from MI6, from the CIA, from French intelligence. But their true allegiance was to the network. Imagine it. A brilliant nuclear physicist, a man who could change the world, is trapped in a Soviet sharashka, a prison laboratory. He is a non-person. He is gone. The Balance Network is activated. A message verified by the Black Templar cipher goes out. A quiet, unassuming cultural attaché, a man with a black ring, in Ankara makes a phone call. A humanitarian aid convoy, run by a shell company, whose logo is a quiet modern cross in a circle, is routed through eastern Turkey. A local guide, another custodian, makes contact. A border crossing is overlooked for just 2 minutes, and the physicist is simply gone. He doesn't appear in Washington or London. He is resettled. Quietly, in Sweden, or Argentina, or Canada, given a new name, a new life, and allowed to continue his work. The West doesn't win. The East doesn't lose. The balance is restored. Knowledge is saved from the fire. This was the new Black Knight. He wasn't a man in armor. He was a man in a quiet suit, holding a passport. The outline, it says it perfectly. These were Shadow Knights, trading swords for rescue planes. They were the Custodes Noxis, reborn. Their mission was the same as it had been in Aragon in 1320, to guard the living archive. This work continued, in total silence, for the entire 45-year-long twilight of the Cold War. They left no medals. They took no credit. Their only record was the work itself. And when the Berlin Wall finally fell, when the Cold War ended, this network, it didn't just disband. An idea, an ethic, that's strong, that pure, it doesn't just die because a wall comes down. It simply evolves. It melts back into the new modern world. It finds new homes. It finds them in the quiet halls of philanthropic groups. It finds them in the boardrooms of corporations. And it finds them in the most secret, most sacred rituals of the very societies that had been whispering their name for centuries. The Berlin Wall falls in 1989. The Soviet Union dissolves. The world exhales. We celebrate. We believe it's the end of history. The great, global, ideological shadow war is finally over. The need for spies, ciphers, and secret networks is finished. But was it? The Balance Network, the custodians who had operated for 50 years, did they simply retire? Did the men with the black rings just go back to teaching history? An idea, an ethic, that powerful, that disciplined, that useful. It doesn't just disappear because a wall comes down. The war had ended, but the world had not. New imbalances were already being created. Global finance, technological disruption, asymmetric warfare. The Custodes didn't retire, they moved. They left the quiet back rooms of the CIA and MI6 and they took on new titles. They became managing directors at hedge funds. They became COOs of private military companies. They joined the boards of Silicon Valley tech firms and global NGOs. They moved from the centers of political power to the new centers of global power. And they brought their ethic with them. That old Templar secret, the one sworn in the Black Oath in 1314, the one used by the Gray Men at Agincourt, it was simply given a new, modern name. It's called discretion. It's called anonymity. It's called influence. The highest, most elite circles of this new globalized world, they have a new motto. You won't see it carved in stone. You'll see it, perhaps, on a small framed plaque in a CEO's office in Zurich, or on the challenge coin of an elite special forces unit. It's a simple Latin phrase, one that the old custodes would have recognized instantly. Deus loquitur in silentio. God speaks in silence. It is the 21st century version of the Black Oath. Real power, true power, doesn't need to be seen. It doesn't need a banner. It doesn't need credit. It just acts. And they pass this creed on. How? Through new, modern initiations. This is the Black Vigil. It's not a medieval ritual. It's not a Masonic legend. It's a modern, psychological test. Imagine an initiate, a young, brilliant, 30-year-old billionaire who has just been invited to join one of these groups, a private, philanthropic, global security circle. He is not taken to a candlelit crypt. He is taken to an anechoic chamber, a high-tech, modern room, so perfectly soundproofed that he can hear his own blood flowing. A room of total, absolute digital silence. And there, in that deafening quiet, he is taught the real lesson, that the noise of the world, the news, the stock market, the wars, the politics, it's all just distraction. The real work, the work of the custodes, is to ignore the noise and to focus with cold, disciplined precision on balance. This is the new Black Vigil. They are not swearing an oath to God or to a king. They are swearing an oath to silence. to the idea that their actions will never be tied to their names. This ritual isn't just for them. It's not just for their own power. It's to prepare them for their public work. A work that, if you know what to look for, you can see right now in the most dangerous places on earth. A work that is, just like in 1453, hidden in plain sight. So, this new generation, these modern custodes, they take their oath of silence in a high-tech chamber. But what is the point? Is it just for their own power? To feel connected to a secret history? No. The Black Oath was never just about silence. It was about service. Service to the balance. And in our world, the world of the 21st century, that balance is more fragile than ever. So, how does this new, modern shadow office act? Look at the places the news cameras go. The war zones, the natural disasters, the failed states. We see the UN. We see the Red Cross. But if you look closer, if you know where to look, you will see other groups. They are smaller, faster, quieter. They are philanthropic organizations with vague neutral names. Global Heritage Initiative, Cross-Cultural Resource Group. They arrive before the UN peacekeepers. They move into a war-torn city, not to stop the fighting, but to go directly to the National Museum or the University Library or the Seed Bank. They are seen in the middle of the chaos, with fire and smoke in the sky, calmly packing ancient manuscripts into climate-controlled cases. They are seen spiriting doctors, scientists, and artists out of a city under siege. They are doing exactly what the Custodes Noxis did in Granada in 1492. They are not saving a nation. They are saving its memory. They are the modern, balanced network. And they are funded. Oh, are they funded? With billions of dollars, channeled anonymously, from the very same hedge funds, tech firms, and private military companies that the custodians now run. This is the public work, the light work, and they leave their mark. It's not a secret, scorched cross hidden in the mud. That's not the modern way. The modern way is to hide in plain sight. Imagine a C-130 cargo plane landing on a dusty, makeshift airstrip in the middle of a conflict zone. It's not a military plane. It's white. Crates are unloaded, medicines, laptops, water purification systems, and on the side of every single crate is a stenciled logo. A simple, modern, corporate logo. Clean lines, professional. It's a logo you've probably seen a dozen times, on a dozen news reports, and your brain just ignored it. It's the logo of the philanthropic organization. But look at it. Really look at it. It's the same ancient sigil. The cross inside the circle. The mark of the Custodes. The emblem from the walls of Constantinople. The ring of the Allied custodians in World War II. It's right there, in the light. This is the quiet continuation of the creed. Help, then vanish. No credit, no flag, no fame, just the work, just the balance. It seems like the perfect modern evolution. The Black Templars, hiding in the light, as a global charity. It's a beautiful, clean story. But it's not the whole story, because while this public work is happening, in the shadows, in the private lodges, the old, dark, forbidden ritual is still being practiced. The public work is for the world, but the ritual, that is for them. And it reveals a truth that the modern corporate logo tries to hide. The logo on the crate, the cross in the circle. That is what they show the world. It's clean. It's positive. It's philanthropic. It's the perfect, modern, corporate mask. But the custodes, The real inner circle. They know this is just a public face. The light work. And they know that to do the light work, you must first be initiated into the dark. So, let's look away from the refugee camp, away from the news cameras. Let's go to the private lodges, to the charitable foundations, and historical societies that meet in unmarked buildings in London, in Boston, in Paris, in Rome. Let's go to the places where the real doctrine is passed on. We look in the modern archives, the private ones, the ones belonging to the highest, most elite degrees of Freemasonry and other, even quieter, brotherhoods. And in these archives, we find it. We find descriptions of a lost rite, a ritual that is not in any of the common guidebooks, a ceremony that is reserved for only a select chosen few. It is called the Black Vigil, and the archives, they describe it in detail. Imagine the initiate. He is not a young tech CEO this time. He is a judge, a general, a university president, a man of established quiet power. He is led into the lodge, but not the main hall, with its checkered floor and its bright symbols of the sun and moon. He is taken down into a crypt, a room, often in the foundation, with bare stone walls. And just like in the candleless rooms of the 16th century, he is placed in total absolute darkness. He stands there, in the cold, for perhaps an hour, silent. Then a single small candle is lit. It does not illuminate the room. It illuminates one thing, an altar. But the altar is empty. There is no Bible on it, no Quran, no Torah, no sacred text of any kind, because this is not an oath to a god. The initiate is instructed to stand before this empty altar in the suffocating darkness and to repeat the words of the vigil. The words are not a prayer. They are a creed. The archives, they give us the exact phrase. A phrase that has been passed down, in secret, for 700 years. The initiate says the words, into the dark. Balance, before faith. Silence, before fame. Think about that. Balance before faith. This is the Black Oath of 1314. This is the ethic of the gray men at Agincourt. This is the logic of the black guests in the Vatican. This is not a memory of the Templars. This is not a historical reenactment. This is a living ceremony. This is the true modern oath. The public-facing charity work, that is just the result of this oath. This is the source. But how? How could a medieval military creed survive intact for 700 years? How could it bridge the gap from a ruined chapel in Aragon to a modern soundproofed room? For centuries, historians dismissed it. They said the Masons, the Rosicrucians, they just invented this ritual in the 18th century. They said it was a romantic fantasy until a new manuscript was found. A manuscript that had been hidden in the very last place anyone thought to look. A manuscript that provided the final, chilling proof, the unbroken chain, the link, right back to Tamar. So, for centuries, that was the debate. Historians, the official record keepers, they looked at this Black Vigil ritual and they dismissed it. They called it romanticism, a fantasy. They said that in the 1700s, during the Enlightenment, men in powdered wigs invented this ritual because they wanted to be descended from the mystical, tragic Knights Templar. It was a good story, they said, a noble, invented ancestry. But it was not history. There was no proof, no unbroken chain, just a gap of 400 years, a gap of pure, silent darkness between the fire of 1314 and the first Masonic lodges of the 1700s. And that is where the story should have ended. Until 2001. In the archives of the Convent of Christ in Tomar, Portugal, that same vast Templar fortress that Napoleon had looted. A team of archivists working on a simple preservation project made a discovery. It wasn't in the Black Vault. It wasn't in a great iron chest. It was hidden inside another book. The spine of a 16th century volume of philosophy was thicker than it should be. When they carefully, meticulously took the binding apart, they found it. A small codex. Not a grand book, but a personal journal, no bigger than a man's hand. Its vellum pages were brittle. Its ink faded to the color of a brown leaf. The language was a strange mix of Latin and Old Portuguese, written in a dense, complex cipher. It took them years to break it. And when they did, the gap, the 400-year silence, vanished. The book was the private coded journal of a 14th century Templar. Not a knight, but a freighter, a brother sergeant, a man who had survived the purges in France, a man who had fled to Tamar, one of the original refugees. And in this journal, dated 1344, 30 years after de Molay's execution, he describes the problem. He writes that the knights, the warriors, are old. They are dying. The Black Oath is dying with them. The order, he writes, cannot survive if it only relies on soldiers. It must evolve. It must pass its vow, its ethic, to men of influence, to men who do not carry swords, to merchants, to scholars, to masons. And so, in the journal, this brother describes a new ritual, a ceremony he himself designed, a ritual to pass the Black Oath to the first civilian custodians. He describes how he would take them into the dark, subterranean Corolla, the Round Templar Church, at midnight. He describes how he would make them stand in total darkness. He describes how he would have them swear an oath, not on a Bible, but on their own silence. And then he writes the words of the oath, the exact words he made them repeat, one by one, in the cold Portuguese dark. Equilibrio antes da fé. Silêncio antes da fama. Balance before faith. Silence before fame. It was identical, the same, exact, word-for-word creed, discovered in a 700-year-old manuscript that is still being whispered today in the black vigil rites, in the dark lodges of London and Paris. This was the proof. The Tamar Codex. It was the unbroken chain. The Black Templar legacy. It wasn't a romantic invention. It wasn't a legend. It is a ceremony. A living, breathing ceremony passed from hand to hand in the dark from a 14th century survivor, all the way to the modern general, the modern judge, the modern CEO. The ritual is real. The oath is real. And if the oath is real, then the purpose, the mission, must also be real. The shadow war of the Custodes Noxis. It never, ever ended. It is still being fought, right now, in our own world, in ways we can't, or perhaps are not meant, to see. So, the Codex is real. The ritual is real. The oath is unbroken. This changes everything. It means the Black Templars, the Custodes Noxis. They are not a memory. They are not a historical curiosity. They are an active, operational network right now. Their shadow war, it never ended. It just rebranded. Think about our modern world. It seems so chaotic. Proxy wars in the Middle East. Financial crises that appear from nowhere. Sudden, shocking ceasefires and brutal civil wars that no one saw coming. Information wars, where the truth itself is the battlefield. We think this is chaos. We think it's random. But the Custodes, they see it as just the new battlefield. And they are still moving, still working, still balancing. How do we see their fingerprint? You won't. Not in the headlines. You have to look in the footnotes. A brutal, intractable civil war. In Africa, perhaps, has been raging for a decade. The UN has failed. The great powers have given up. And then, suddenly, in a single 48-hour period, a total ceasefire is announced. The news anchors are stunned. They credit local activists or a sudden change of heart. But the real story, the one whispered in the intelligence community, is that a small unarmed team from a Swiss strategic consulting firm, a firm with no website, no public client list, had been meeting with both warlords in the dark for months. They didn't offer money. They didn't threaten. They just mediated. They were the black guests, the gray men. This is the modern Custodes Noxis. Or, look at the other side of their work, the balance network. A natural disaster strikes, an earthquake, a tsunami. A remote, resource-rich part of the world is destabilized. Before the Red Cross can even get a plane in the air, a small, highly efficient humanitarian rescue team, a team that seems to be composed entirely of ex-special forces, is already on the ground. They are not just pulling people from the rubble. They are seen moving directly to the local university's geology lab, to the regional data hub. They are rescuing the data, the resource maps, the intellectual property. They are saving the living archive before the corporate looters or the rival nations can swoop in and steal it. And how do they signal to other rescue teams? How do they mark a building as cleared or secured? They don't use spray paint. One aid worker, in a debriefing, mentioned something strange. He said he saw these quiet professionals leaving a small, simple mark on the rubble to guide their teams. It wasn't a cross. It wasn't a logo. It was just a circle, drawn in chalk. A simple, perfect circle. The symbol of balance. The sigil from Constantinople. The war is invisible now. It's fought in data streams, in stock market algorithms, in ceasefires, and in disaster zones. But the fingerprint, the ethic, is the same. And this is the most important part. Why? Why do they still do this? It's not for God. It's not for a king. It's not even for a nation. It's for something else. A new, colder, more pragmatic religion. The final evolution of their 700-year-old code. So, why? Why do they still do it? The general, the banker, the CEO, the custodian, who has everything. Why do they still meet in the dark? Why do they risk their lives and fortunes to extract a scientist from a war zone or to mediate a secret ceasefire? Because their creed has survived, but it is no longer a religion. The Black Oath of 1314 was sworn by men who still believed in God. They just no longer believed in the Pope. But 700 years of war, of reformation, of enlightenment, of revolution, of world wars, that burns the faith out of an organization. So, what is left? What is left is the ethic, the function, the creed that survives today, the one they whisper in the Black Vigil. It's not a religion. It's an operating system. It's a cold, pragmatic, ethical code, boiled down from 7 centuries of brutal experience. And it has only 2 principles, the same 2 principles from the Tamar Codex. First, serve the balance. This is the key. They don't serve good. They don't serve evil. They don't serve America or Russia or China or God. They serve the system, the balance. They believe that any one power, allowed to grow too strong, whether it's a king, a pope, a dictator, or a corporation, becomes a tyranny, an imbalance, a chaos. And their job is to be the counterweight. They will prop up a failing state just enough to stop a rival from consuming it. They will leak information just enough to stop a corporation from becoming a monopoly. They will protect the living archive, the scientist, the artist, not because they are good, but because their knowledge is a necessary counterweight to the ignorance of the mob. They are not heroes. They are gardeners, pruning the branches of history to make sure no single branch grows so large that it blocks the sun from all the others. And the second principle is how they survive doing it. Speak to no one. Silence before fame. This isn't about modesty. It's about survival. The moment they take credit, the moment they put their name on a victory, they become a player. They become a target. And the moment they are a target, they are no longer neutral. They are no longer the mediator. They lose their one true power, their invisibility. Their power comes from the fact that no one knows who they are. The two warlords in the dark room, they don't have to trust each other. They just have to trust that the black guests will kill either of them if they break the truce. That is the Black Templar power. It is the power of the unknown, the power of the shadow. This is the code of usefulness. The Black Templar network survives for one reason. It is useful. It is the one, truly neutral, ruthlessly effective third party on the planet. The secret plumber that all the world powers call when they have a problem they cannot possibly solve in the light. And so, this brings us to the end, to the final question. We have followed this thread from a burning pyre in Paris to a digital network that spans the globe. But after all this, after 700 years, does this order, these Black Templars, do they really still exist? Or have we been asking the wrong question all along? And so, here we are, at the end of the long road. We have followed a single thread of shadow for 700 years, from the ashes of a pyre in Paris to the cold, digital silence of a modern boardroom. And now, we must decide. We must render the verdict. What is the Black Templar? Because in the end, we are left with two very different histories. The first is the visible history, the one the world knows, the one written in stone and on papal bulls. In this history, the story is simple. The order was arrested in 1307. It was declared heretical, corrupt. It was dissolved by the Pope in 1312. Jacques de Molay burned in 1314. Their lands were seized. Their castles were given to other, more loyal orders. The story ends. It is a tragedy, a footnote, a dead order turned to ash. But then there is the other history, the invisible history, the one we have been whispering tonight. In this history, the fire was not an end. It was a filter. It was a purification. It burned away the land, the gold, the politics, and it left only the oath. An oath that created the milites sine sigillo, the soldiers without a seal, the gray men of the 100 Years' War, the black guests of the Reformation, the night sailors of the Armada, the custodians of the world wars, and the balanced network of the Cold War. In this history, the Black Templars are a machine, a living, breathing, unbroken organization, passed from hand to hand, from generation to generation, a secret, apostolic succession of shadow, still operating right now, just beneath the surface of our world. So, which is it? A tragic myth? Or a terrifying, living machine? The truth, perhaps, is more subtle than both. Think about that code of usefulness, that perfect pragmatic cold ethic. Balance before faith. Silence before fame. Is that ethic so powerful, so useful, that it doesn't need an unbroken 700-year-old organization to keep it alive? Maybe. There is no grand master in a secret crypt. Maybe. Every time a new generation faces a new global chaotic imbalance, they reinvent the same solution. Maybe every generation, the spy masters, the bankers, the generals, they look for a method, a way to work in the shadows, a way to be the neutral, unseen hand. And when they look, they find the legend. They find the story of the Black Templars. And they adopt it. They take the name. They take the sigil. They take the mask. Because the legend is the perfect cover, the perfect pre-made blueprint for the code of usefulness. Maybe the Black Templars are not a lineage. Maybe they are a habit that humanity, that power, simply refuses to forget. And so, maybe that is the final, most profound secret. Perhaps the Black Templars did die. Perhaps Jacques de Molay was the end. And perhaps the idea of them, the ghost of them, was so powerful, so perfect, that the world itself simply conjured them back into existence again and again. The shadow that they left behind was a vacuum, a blueprint, and every generation since, when faced with chaos, has poured its own secrets, its own ambitions, and its own fears into that empty, waiting shape. The machine simply rebuilt itself. In the end, it doesn't matter if the man in the dark lodge is a direct blood and oath descendant of a 14th century knight, or if he is a modern banker who simply found the blueprint and put on the mask. The function is the same. The result is the same. The shadow is still there. The outline for our journey tonight ends with a single chilling thought. Perhaps the Black Templars never lived in the dark. Perhaps the dark learned to live through them. And so I leave you with that question. As you get ready for sleep, as the world outside your window grows quiet, you can decide. Are they a secret order? A living 700-year-old machine, still quietly serving the balance? Or are they a habit, a myth so powerful, so useful, that humanity simply refuses to forget it? Thank you for listening, for walking with me once again into the shadows. If you believe that history is not just what is written, but what is whispered, I invite you to join our community. Subscribe. Share this story. It helps us keep these whispers alive. For now, let the world fade. Let the mystery rest. Sleep well and wonder about the shadows that are perhaps still serving the balance.